For deeper analysis on the latest developments, we are joined by Mr. Alabbas Alsudani, a Chevening scholar and the London School of Economics and Political Science, live from London. Thank you so much, Mr. Alsudani, for being with us on Asia One. Now, Hamas has agreed in principle to disarm. How significant could this be? And do you think it could pave the way for a lasting ceasefire?
Good afternoon. Thank you for the invitation. I would say it's genuinely significant, but there are three important caveats here we need to notice before we define and detect the significance of this agreement. Firstly, if confirmed, this agreement with disarmament with Hamas would be Trump's most substantive foreign policy achievement of the current cycle. The Gaza Board of Peace framework producing results. This how it could be read. However, it is still in principle, not in practice, and these two concepts are different. And Hamas has a very known history of differentiating between political disarmament and military disarmament. However, this is one. Secondly, the critical question is who will take over the vacuum that will happen after Hamas disarmament, meaning who will govern Gaza after this disarmament if it's transferred from in principle to in practice. And then the other important point, caveat, is even if this doesn't translate a lasting ceasefire with Iran. So the Iranian situation will be still aside. So three points to determine whether this disarmament agreement is significant and will provide a longer effect on the for a resolution, which is Hamas disarmament mechanism. I'm summarizing the governance structure of Gaza and a separate US-Iran framework.
So, President Donald Trump has met with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu amid ongoing tensions with Iran. How do you assess the priorities of the US-Israel partnership at this stage?
I think the partnership now is facing constraints, and I think we need or let me put it in the way that the partnership itself, it's being redefined now. Both two leaders, Trump and Netanyahu, are seeking different priorities. Netanyahu wants sustained military pressure on Iran until regime capacity is broken. Trump, on the other hand, wants a deal that allows him to declare victory before the midterm elections in the US. And this is a big factor here. So these two goals are in tension, not in alignment. However, Trump publicly said that Netanyahu knows who the boss is, and that shows there is a big gap between Netanyahu and Trump, although they are cooperating with each other. So if I summarize, I would say the current phase of this partnership is operational coordination. This operational coordination exists and it continues, but strategic priorities are diverging into different way. Netanyahu wants to strikes to continue. Trump wants a deal. So this kind of disagreement between the allies themselves putting this partnership under risk. And even if Trump has the upper hand or Netanyahu has always his own way to influence Trump directly or indirectly.
So, Mr. Alsudani, Iran says it targeted U.S. military positions in Kuwait with drone attacks. What message is it trying to send to Washington and also to Gulf states?
Before the message, let's talk about the justification that the Iranians officials offered. They offered a justification stating that this is a retaliation for the U.S. strikes on Qashem Island 2 days ago. And if we look at the pattern, because it's so important here, Iran targeted U.S. military infrastructure. They did not target Kuwaiti, for example, civilian sites or oil facilities in that particular attack. However, Iran is still using its coercive diplomacy and coercive actions, spreading out coercion all among the region, taking the opportunity of the war to dominate and start re-hegemonize the region. Now, jumping to the messages you asked about, I think there are three messages Iran is sending. The first message is to Washington. Every US strike on Iranian soil will produce a proportional strike on US assets. This is what the Iranian is trying to say to the Americans. The second message could be to the Gulf states. Like, for example, they are saying hosting US bases carries a price. You are supporting the US, that carries a price that you need, a cost that you need to pay. The third message, I would look at it from a domestic level to the Iran. The Iranian officials are sending a message to the Iranian public. The regime is still alive, is still defending sovereignty and responding to civilian casualties, particularly children, and this narrative that the Iranians are using now. And that what that actually tells us, Iran has adopted a doctrine of how can I put it, escalatory reciprocity. So they are using the escalation as a diplomacy to send these messages and to build this doctrine and to reborn and regenerate their capacity to resist using their very obvious strategy, the forward defense.
So, Mr. Alsudani, now with tensions between the United States and Iran still high, do you see diplomacy gaining momentum, or is the risk for further military escalation still there?
I think both are true, both are correct, because I literally mentioned that what we are seeing is coercive diplomacy. However, I think the term has evolved into what I call sustained coercive settlement. So, sustained coercive settlements mean they are not even yet just redesigning the negotiation or the agreements among each other, but they are trying to come up with a new agreement that guarantee leverage and the privilege for both sides. The Trump-Hamas Gaza framework signed yesterday is a signal for diplomacy. The talks that are still being continued through Amman and Qatar is a signal for diplomacy. Iran's Iraq remains publicly engaged through he's carefully engaged, but he's publicly engaged, saying not seeking further mediation with the US, but we are ready to talk if they can give concessions. However, on the other hand, there are evidence for escalation. For example, what you literally mentioned 8 minutes ago, the Egypt being struck for the first time on last Wednesday, the mediation architecture that is being changed over and over, the 17 US service members that were killed, the Brent crude oil that jumped over then hundreds. So both what you mentioned are true, but I would lean that the possibility now for escalation would be higher than the possibility for diplomacy. But another way to look at it, even escalation, as I mentioned, what I call it the sustained coercive settlement, even escalation itself is a tool of diplomacy in one way or another.
Mr. Alabbas Alsudani, thank you so much for being with us on Asia One.